Welcome to a bonus episode of Geek Warning. Usually we keep such bonus episodes for members of Escape Collective, but it simply wouldn't be right to limit this one. I'm Dave Rome, and today I'm chatting with two key people from what is arguably the most impactful, bicycle-centric, not-for-profit in the world. Yep, it's the World Bicycle Relief, aka WBR. Of course, this is a tech podcast, so we'll soon be getting geeky with the recently announced Buffalo Utility S2 bike and the design that goes into mobilizing communities in poverty. Joining me for this chat is Dave Neiswander, the CEO of World Bicycle Relief. Hey, Dave.
Hey, Dave. Great to be here.
And also, we have World Bicycle Relief's lead product designer, Andy Samways. Hey, Andy.
Hi, Dave. Also good to be here.
Great. Okay, well, before we get to the tech, Dave, I suspect many of our listeners are already familiar with World Bicycle Relief, but for those who aren't, can you tell me what the organization does?
Sure. Again, thanks so much for having both Andy and I on here. Excited to talk about the Utility S2. The World Bicycle Relief started, almost 20 years ago as a response to the Indian Ocean tsunami that devastated Southeast Asia in 2004. And what we found is that the devastation that happened in that disaster, the challenges there is around the mobility and the 250,000 people that perished. There's 250,000 people that perish in Africa every 6 weeks as it relates to diseases that can be cured in poverty. And one of the major challenges is last mile mobility. And it's often overlooked in the development sector. There's over 1 billion people that live in rural areas isolated by distance, terrain, and poverty from economic opportunities, markets, healthcare, and education. So World Bicycle Relief really is about how we can mobilize individuals and communities so that we can improve the outcomes in healthcare and education and broaden people's economic opportunities so individuals and their communities can thrive.
Okay. So, I mean, yeah, you mentioned it's, 2 decades ago that the initiative started, the organization started. These days, I mean, there's got to be countless success stories. I mean, what are some of the countries that World Bicycle Relief are in? And I guess what are some of the more notable success stories that you have?
Oh, absolutely. No, we're operational in Zambia, Zimbabwe, Malawi, Kenya, Uganda, Colombia, and we'll be launching this year into Tanzania. So seeing the opportunity as far as expansion there. And I think, part of our greatest successes is really understanding the need that was not being met as it relates to that mobility poverty. People that were having to walk to access school, walk to access markets, to take their sick child 10, 15 kilometers to get to a health clinic. And by having a purpose-designed bicycle, the Buffalo bicycle, which we'll talk about, being able to bridge that gap. So the success stories that I think about are the look in the eyes of a young girl who, receiving a bicycle, now can achieve her dreams of her education, or that mother that can take her sick child to the clinic, or a farmer that can take their goods to the marketplace on a more reliable basis so he can take care of his family. So those are the successes that we get the amazing privilege every day to engage in the communities and to measure that impact. And the simple, humble bicycle is a huge development tool to really overcome some of these factors.
I think for me, what's most surprising in researching it, and obviously I've known about World Bicycle Relief for quite a while, but I still wasn't quite aware at the scale that you run at. I mean, how many bikes have you put out there now, and I guess how many lives have been impacted by that?
Sure. As of now, it's as last July, I'm looking at 826,614 bicycles in the field.
Yeah. Right.
If you add a 5 times multiplier, and we do that because there's typically in the countries where we operate, in the communities, there's about 5 people per household, and the bicycle really is cross-cutting. A student can take it to the bike to get to school in the morning, but then the mother can take the bicycle to take a child to the clinic, or on the weekends they can take their corn to the grinding mill. So really, it is really a sectoral cross multiplier. So that's over 4 million people's lives that have been improved by bicycles.
Yeah, that's amazing. And can you talk to me a bit about let's start with how is it funded? Like how's the organization funded? Who founded it?
Yeah, we've been very fortunate to have amazing support from the cycling industry at the beginning, but also individual cyclists. And that is still the largest funder for World Bicycle Relief is individuals, both giving at the equivalent of one bicycle, which is about 165 US dollars, or people that be inspired by a little bit more and give larger amounts. We do have some foundational and amazing corporate partnerships globally, and we have a little bit of government funding. But the large part of it is individual donors.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, that government funding, is that coming in from the countries that you operate in, or is that more coming from, say, the United States?
The largest we have is the USAID. We did really a fascinating research funding that came in to really understand what is the bicycle market system. So within, I think it was 6 different countries, doing a deep dive research to understand what is the bicycle system, what are the challenges as far as supply and demand of bicycles, and how is it that you can improve access to quality bicycles to help improve some of these development outcomes.
Okay, all right. If I'm not mistaken, there's also some sort of economic growth that you're helping with, where you're basically establishing bike shops and sort of making it a sustainable business model for communities. Like you're creating local employment and then educating people on how to service these bikes. And then is that a self-sustaining model? Like are there cases where that's up and running and I guess the bikes are servicing?
Absolutely. From the very beginning, we didn't want to be sort of a dump and run type organization where just here's the bicycles and we walk away.
Yeah.
And so sort of starting up our operations and doing the bicycle design, realizing that you can design a quality bicycle, you can have it well manufactured, it can be shipped to where you're wanting to deliver the bicycle, but you want to make sure you have a good assembly. And so in each one of our operating countries, we have a talented team of qualified, skilled assemblers that are employed by World Bicycle Relief, make sure that we have quality assembly, and then also the distribution to the communities. But equally important is that we've trained mechanics in the field where we have delivered bicycles. So in the communities where we deliver bicycles, we train mechanics that are local business people that are looking to improve their skills. We've trained over 3,500 mechanics to date. So part of that sustainability of thinking through, you want to make sure that people have access to quality mechanics, quality repair and maintenance. And then the next step is thinking about, we want to make sure people have access to aftermarket support, spare parts. Where are they going so that they can get a quality spare part? So we now have over 100 Buffalo Bicycle retail shops that are operating in our countries of operation that not only allow people to purchase quality bicycle spare parts and components for their Buffalo bicycle, but also it's compatible for other bicycles that are locally available. The other way is also they can purchase a bicycle. Individual consumers more and more are purchasing bicycles directly from us.
Interesting. Okay. And I guess not to get too into the weeds on that, but is that also, that's not for profit as well, the retail avenue, like from...
The retail avenue is that we have World Bicycle Relief, which is not for profit, and it owns 100% of the for-profit operations. So all the profit and revenue and the income from that goes back into World Bicycle Relief.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. And how would
so that is, to your point, that is sustainable.
Yeah.
So in our different countries of operation, like we've been operating in Zambia almost 18 years. And so that is an ongoing profitable enterprise. I think it has about 40 Buffalo bicycle retail shops. We just entered into Tanzania this year. So that'll be up and coming. Colombia was back in 2020, 2018, I think, and for Malawi. Uganda was just last year in 2023. So each country is at a different level of sustainability in their life cycle.
Okay, so some of these bikes are getting into the communities via, I guess, pure charity, like you're giving them through grants or whatever it is, to healthcare workers or to young students to make a difference there. But then there's also opportunity for families to buy these bikes as well. Am I reading that right?
Yeah, more and more we're implementing in partnerships with the communities, with governments, with other nonprofit organizations, high impact bicycle mobility programs. And typically that's a learn to earn program as far as people that are continuing their education or people that are doing healthcare volunteer work in the communities, ways for them to have access to bicycles. So that's one part of the philanthropic works that we do that sort of go up to higher development goals. Then we also have consumer sales. So individual consumers can purchase our bicycles as well. And it really is all about, when we think about the bicycles, the trained mechanics, the retail shops and spare parts, it's really creating that sustainable ecosystem so that people can have the ability for those bicycles not just to last for 2, 3, 4 years, but for 5 years, for 10 years.
Interesting. All right. Well, I know. WBR just recently released the strategy for the next couple of years, so I'd love to come back to that towards the end. But I guess, this being the Geek Warning podcast, we probably should talk about the bike, and I think we discussed it on the podcast a month or so back, and we had quite a lot of listener interest in wanting to know more. So yeah, I mean, I'm keen to hear about this, and I guess for a bit of background. World Bicycle Relief have long had their own bike, the Buffalo bike, and it recently got an overhaul and an update, and was interestingly launched at Eurobike and won a gold award for it. So it's the Buffalo Utility S2 is the new bike. So I guess basics start. Andy, I mean, I might ask you this, but what's the general design goal of a Buffalo bike? Like, what is it trying to achieve that a more regular bike that might already exist can't do?
I would say, if you going right back to the beginning of World Bicycle Relief, from talking with FK and Dave and the people that were there at the beginning, I think it was with perhaps some reluctance that we had to get into the bicycle game at all. I think it was out of necessity that, for no money could we find something that we could, with a clear conscience, give to people and, expect it to come back and be working. So I think what underpins the bike is always longevity. And, interestingly, we found a photo of a rider who'd been the recipient of one of the first prototype Buffaloes. And this was, 10, 12 years later and, still working, had a smile on his face. He was still using it the way it was intended. And I think that's the goal. We want to see that, everywhere we deploy these bikes is we want to come back in 10 years and see them still running. So it's fundamentally about, we design, features and functions, but with respect to time. So we want to see them endure over time. I
guess, we're talking about a lot of areas that are in poverty. So we're not talking about paved roads here in often the case. There's a lot of dirt roads, a lot of rugged terrain. I mean, what does a regular ride on a Buffalo bike look like?
The regular ride, I certainly think in my world, we try and isolate those things which are kind of the worst, the worst things. We try and build up a picture, right? Who's going to use it this way? Who's going to, we all go and see this stuff. And, going back to FK and Dave in the early days, our process really begins with observation and seeing what really happens to the product and trying to build up this kind of picture of all the things this thing has to survive. And so you might find a bike in almost continuous operation, which is unlike anything that, bikes typically get designed for. I mean, bikes are not designed to be ridden from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. 7 days a week. That's just not a thing. And so, this goes back to some of the earliest design features, like the work we did on the 100-kilogram carrier, which is a sort of staple of our bike. But this was born of observing people carrying these kind of loads and the work they would have to do to make that they'd bought actually, deliver that, functionality over time. And we would take that knowledge away and design that feature and find a way to make it affordable and put it in there. So we're always trying to build up a coherent picture of all the different pressures that exist on the bike, whether it's cost or usage or durability or shipping or efficiency or whatever. Suffice to say that the picture we build up is a tough one to design for, but that's what makes it fun, I think.
What are some of the more extreme use cases you're aware of that you've heard and just been blown away by that the bikes are being used in such a way?
Every time you think you've seen the worst someone can do, then you round a corner and someone's doing something else. You name it, whatever you can think of being carried, somebody's carrying it. Bricks, cement, piles of wood so high. I think the ones that always baffle me are, when you've got somebody with so much liquid piled up high in cans and canisters, and I can't even fathom how you would balance that thing. But I think we always find that if we add this functionality, people will find a way to max it out and we've just been experimenting with, making our carriers a bit longer. And so people have been trying to cram even more on the back. And, the upshot of that is you can get more stuff where you need to take it. And, there seems to be no limit to what people will try and do with a bike because it's so important. It's people's livelihoods and people's connection to the world. And so yeah, it takes a beating for sure.
Yeah, there's a really lovely photo on the World Bicycle Relief website showing basically a whole family on the bike, which is a mother and 3 kids, or I think it was. And yeah, I mean it's pretty awesome. Just what's basically a regular wheelbase bike and a rear rack, a pannier rack. So yeah, I mean they're definitely putting them to the extreme. But I guess let's talk about this new bike. So I mean, yeah, it came out when it came out, July, was it? It came out a month ago at this point.
Yeah, about July. It's kind of tricky for us to pin down because we say we launched the bike, but of course our customers are in Colombia, Southern Africa, Eastern Africa, and so it's not really launched until they're riding it.
Yeah, they're not looking out for Eurobike coverage, are they?
Right. But this is an important part of getting the word out and telling the world about what we've been working on for the last few years. But it's out. We're processing our sort of first production orders right now, and preparing for shipments. And those shipments will be heading off to our different countries, and people will be riding them before too long.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, coming from the original Buffalo to the S2, I mean, what were some of the design goals that you aim to fix?
That was pretty simple. I think it's worth understanding a little bit about our process and how we approach the design of the bike. And so we're a little different in that right from the beginning of WBR, we've acknowledged that the magic of the bike is in its rotational components. So the bearings, anything that's under load and moving, that's what makes it last and makes it work. And so we don't really start with the frame and then spec the parts. We start sort of with the bearings and design out. And, the S2 is very much our Buffalo bike. It's just the next sort of version of it. And crucially, this was about probably the biggest and longest problem we've been tackling, which is that of getting another gear on the bike. And, when I first met FK back in 2010, when we started this journey, and we've had numerous attempts at trying to do it, it's not been easy. He sort of said, for no money, can we get a multi-speed drivetrain to last in these environments? And it's not just the duty that goes on the product. It's got to be serviceable. It's got to be accessible with tools. It's got to be affordable. You've got to be able to, tune it and adjust it and all the things that go along with drivetrains, or typically go along with drivetrains. And so, we've tried all kinds of stuff over the years, and we've eventually come down to, this new drivetrain. And that's really the heart of what the S2 bike is about. It's our Buffalo with this latest multi-speed drivetrain. And I think it's, you can talk about the sort of nitty-gritty of drivetrain and ratios and all that stuff, but what it means to people is, you don't have to get off and push. You can get that bike moving under load more easily. You can get up terrains, you can deal with potholes and things. And so it makes a huge difference in not just the usability of the bike, but in the outcomes that we're trying to achieve as a company.
Yeah, so something I hadn't covered yet is that, well, Bicycle Relief, I mean, FK Day that you keep mentioning there, he was one of the founders of SRAM or the brother of a founder. Was he officially a founder?
Yeah, one of the founders, yeah.
He was one of the founders? Yeah. There you go. So yeah, I mean, you've got I guess, well, Bicycle Relief came as a not-for-profit offshoot of SRAM in a sense, a way of giving back. And yeah, I mean, you've got the world of SRAM to pull resources from. You could take the internal geared hubs that SRAM had done for years. You could take derailleur based systems, but you didn't do that. You came up with something unique. 2 chains. So can you explain, I guess, how you landed on the idea and most importantly, I'm really keen to hear how it works.
Yeah, and to your first point, I think anything we do at WBR, and particularly in product, has a very big kind of collaborative footprint. I mean, we lean on people from across the industry for all kinds of support and help, and it's really a great success story of our industry. I think that so many people have contributed in so many different ways. The story of the 2 chains is an interesting one. I think we tried with 3-speed systems for years. We'd looked at internal gear hubs. They would obviously experiment with derailleurs without much success. And it was one of the engineers at SRAM in their advanced development group who'd sort of said, there's a lot of utility to 2 gears. it's a little difficult to get your head around initially because, as people who ride modern bikes, you're sort of drowned in gears all the time. But, in our markets, the single speed bike is the norm, whether it starts out as a single speed or very quickly becomes a single speed because it stops working. And it's enough to get another gear on the bike. So, this was a process of, taking what works, i.e. a single speed drivetrain, and just putting two of them on the bike. That's the kind of concept behind it. Of course, there's the magic of the shifting and the patented mechanism that was developed in there. But, single speed chains and sprockets and chain tensioning and this kind of stuff, this is inherent to any single speed bike. And so we're not introducing too much more in the way of complexity with this system. And there's a couple of other problems that seem very appealing to us. One is that, as a cyclist, you'll be familiar with tuning derailleurs and getting them to shift and all this stuff. This is a system that has no adjustments. There's no tuning of the gears. It's all baked into the design of the system. So you really can kind of set it and forget it like a single speed. And that's a big deal for us.
Yeah, and you've sort of preset the ratios to work, like you kind of we're laughing about not laughing about it, but we'll amused by it on the podcast a few weeks back, where you've basically magic geared the bike, which is anyone that's familiar with single speeds can take some time to do, and you've done it effectively twice to get these ratios to work. But yeah, so I mean, you've set the ratios, you've even set the number of chain links for each gear that the mechanics need to use, but yeah, how does it work? Like how does two chains become two gears?
Well, one would always like to have a visual aid, but I'll do my best at describing it. I mean, we can understand a single speed drivetrain and the ratios created between the chainring and the cog at the back, and so the difference between those two sizes sets the ratio. And we have two of those. There's two chainrings and two sprockets, and so you imagine two single speed drivetrains working independently. Only one of them can be supplying drive to the rear wheel, so only one of those chains is actually transmitting torque into the system. And so the freewheel at the back has a little switching mechanism inside that determines which of those chains and therefore which of those ratios is connected to the rear wheel. So you're just switching between one of two single speed drivetrains, if you like. And so there's a little system of pulls and ratchets in the freewheel that when you pedal backwards, it switches one off and switches the other on. And so you can, kind of like a ballpoint pen, when you click it up and down, it just switches between two states. It's a sort of similar kind of mechanism to that.
Okay. Is it at all similar to like a BMX kind of free coaster hub style, or is it different again?
No, it's a little different to that. I mean, okay. It works. It's basically, its interface with the hub is like a standard screw-on freewheel. So it's like a single speed freewheel. It was a free coaster is sort of, effectively a coaster brake without a couple of the parts, but this is like a screw-on freewheel. It's like two freewheels together with a switching mechanism between them. Yeah.
Okay. And why put a patent on it? Is what's the idea around that rather than just keeping it open?
I think because I think we feel that this is one of our core strengths as a product company, and these are assets we can build upon. And I think our position within the places where we operate is we can show a better way. We know we won't be the only people doing bikes. There's lots of other people, and the numbers are just so big that we can't be the only player. We have to be one of many, but I think we can occupy a lead position. And so our patented technologies become important to us. These are the sort of how we keep ratcheting the bike up, and how we can protect the things we invent and invest in so we can bring them to more people. But I think we always intended that it's not about making Buffalo successful, it's about making the riders successful. And so we'll always look for other ways to use that part. We've often talked about partnering with other companies and selling it to other bike makers, because I think what you see with bikes in our markets is there's lots of people doing them, but they always run into the same problems of it's the drivetrain that lets you down. And with our connections to SRAM and the industry and our own sort of in-house expertise, this is really, us where we direct our efforts, and I think where we can add the most value.
And I guess, so that system, that two-speed system is, as you said, it's basically a freewheel. It just screws onto a freewheel style hub, and So yeah, the entire 2-speed system just unscrews and is a cheap replaceable part if needed. Is am I reading that right?
Yeah, it's all relative. I mean, I think it's probably the single most expensive part on the bike. It's brand new. I mean, I think in our world, yeah, we're cost constrained, and so part of the design of the bike is trying to find trade-offs and trying to balance out the spec of the bike so you can pay for such an important feature. And I think we find that some people might replace it, but more people are going to repair it, and so a lot of work has gone into trying to make sure, all right, you can get this thing open and you have a chance of being able to fix it and get it back together and it work, better than it did. I think one of the reasons why we gave up on internal gear hubs after a while is just in what world can we expect anyone to service these things?
Sure.
That
very complex,
the right tools and all that.
Yeah,
I think with this system that you have a chance of doing it right. And so we develop, we try and work with as simple tools as we can. We develop the sort of service instructions. We create the service kits. So that development of our shop infrastructure and so on is really important for that.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, you mentioned the cost restraints there. I mean, what is and Dave, you'd mentioned this before, that you basically can buy, if you're an individual and you want to be charitable, you can buy a bike for US $165 approximately. But is that the cost of the bike? Like, yeah, how expensive are these bikes to make, and yeah, what does all that look like?
Sure, I can do a stab at that. Looking at the, there's different costs when you think about what is your cost of a bicycle, right? And so there's the bill of materials itself. There's a lot of steel that goes into the Buffalo bicycle. Weighs about 50 pounds. It is no joke. So when the cost of steel goes up, that affects us. And then while working with our suppliers, the cost of transportation from the supply chain from Asia to primarily Africa, but also to Colombia, and then inland cost of transport from the ports to the individuals. So once it gets down to getting to the shop or the consumer price, it's about $200 is the consumer price per bicycle. We use 165 as the representative cost because on a incremental basis, that is the representative cost of the bicycle going into a program. And so, so between that.
Can an individual actually buy one of these if they wanted one? Say they're in the US and they wanted a Buffalo bike. Is that something available at this time?
It is not.
Okay.
Our product is very much designed, and our resources laser focused on serving the communities in Africa, in Asia, and in other places. So,
gotcha. Okay, all right. So that bike, I mean, you were talking about things needing to be serviceable in the field and incredibly durable. But what does the testing of such a bike look like? Like, how do you if for these changes that you implemented for the S2, like what did the testing look like before you released it and before you started taking orders for it?
I mean, I would say that for us, the testing is the sort of backbone of the project. I mean, that's the feedback loop. And, we do as much sort of in-house lab testing, and we lean on as many people as possible. But really, our field testing has been probably the most important part of development. And it takes time and it takes a lot of energy to interpret what we're seeing and shipping parts back and forth for analysis. But we're sort of expanding it. We've relied mostly on test riders in Kenya for this project, and we've had anywhere between sort of 15 and 20, depending on what we're doing. Some of whom have been riding with us since 2010. They've got a lot of history on our bike, so those riders have almost become development partners in a way, and they can tell us a little bit about what's going on. And so that part of it is a huge part of the project. And anything we do in our lab testing has to be sort of calibrated against what we see in real life, and invariably we learn so much more from the field testing than we do from the lab testing that, it will be part of our process indefinitely.
Okay. And that lab testing, like how different is that to, say, a consumer product? Say if you're testing a derailleur system or something, is it completely different or similarities?
Yeah. I mean, we had, like anything, any product, you break it down into its functions and you test those functions individually, and then you'll also do system tests that test the whole thing. And for anything new, I mean, you've got to sort of invent some of the tests as you go as well. And we had to make a few, sort of during the pandemic in the garage type bits of test equipment just to keep the learning coming. And so we have a little kind of suite of tests, some of which we rely on, some SRAM's drivetrain tests and things like that. But no one's ever really designed a product quite like this. So
Sure.
no one has off the shelf tests we can use for it. So some of them we've had to invent.
And the frame, like, I mean, is that being tested to regular like ISO standards, or is it just being taken to an extreme as far as what you expect that frame to last?
No, I mean the frame is relatively straightforward. I mean,
Okay.
it's the ISO tests are pretty comprehensive from that point of view. We've just kind of redone them just recently and just go through them. I mean, I think the frame in some senses is one of the least interesting parts of the bike because it's caused us so few problems.
Yeah,
I mean, I don't think we've warranted a frame since we've been dealing with the Buffalo as we know it. I mean, I think they just they just keep going on and on and on. So yes, we test them. Yes, we verify them. We check their quality and all that, but it hasn't caused us a lot of trouble.
And they're purposely overbuilt by the sounds of it. If the bike's 50 pounds.
Yeah, there's a lot of steel in there,
Sure.
but it's also because you want it to be repairable. I mean, the off chance that somebody does break it or want to modify it. I mean, steel is still a material that you can find people who can weld steel, more easily than you can find other things. And so, having a nice thickly built steel frame is something that people can cope with almost indefinitely.
So, sorry, just to interject, just amazing. We were in Zambia this last November and visiting in different communities and still could find bicycles from 15 years ago.
Wow.
And the frames that are still going. I mean, obviously some things have been modified and adjusted, but you could still see it as a Buffalo bicycle from 15 years on.
Are people making the Buffalo bicycles their own? Like, do you see them like with different colored grips and all that sort of thing? Like, is there sort of a market
Absolutely.
for customizing these?
Absolutely. What's really fun is when you go out to the schools, and so you do a school distribution going to students, and there might be 200 bicycles going to that school. And so the students will definitely put a little paint here, a little bit of bling there to make it their own, to make it stand out. Yeah,
okay. Are there any ridiculous upgrades that come to mind where you just didn't expect to see them and they've been done? Like, has anyone repurposed, found some carbon wheels maybe or something like that, or
no,
not in those areas? Okay.
Those will last a day.
Yeah, sure.
You know what is interesting though is you look at the way people modify and adapt their bikes. I mean, these are all design briefs. You can look at it and go, if you see enough people doing something, you can maybe we got to think about that. And so a lot of changes have come out of just observing the way people modify things and what are people trying to do here. And that's an important feedback loop on the design of the bike in general, I think.
Yeah.
We mentioned
cost, and the innovation.
Yeah, gotcha. Okay. Cost restraints before that we're discussing. Is there anything, I guess, on the bike that you'd say like, cost no issue? We'd look to change X. You mentioned that they're trying to, they'll carry as much as the bike can take, basically, whatever they can fit. Is that the answer? Like, it would be a cargo bike rather than a more traditional bike if money weren't an issue?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think, again, it's another part of our unique approach is that we're not trying to specialize the bike for a task.
Sure.
We want it to be very universal.
Okay.
And so we're looking at all these things and also knowing that, someone might be carrying all this stuff, but then someone might be riding it to school. I mean, might be a family vehicle, might be something that everyone has to use. So we're trying to find the best fit for all these functions.
Gotcha.
And so I don't think there's any one area apart from durability where we would want to, lean into too much. I think, a cargo bike is a wonderful thing, but, try getting it down a flight of stairs.
Sure. Okay.
And so we have to think, what gets used to get someone to school during the week might get used for something else on the weekend. And so we approach it like a tool, like it's got to do lots of things.
Gotcha. And it's a one size fits all frame. That there's just the one bike that you make. What sort of from what age can someone typically get on one of these bikes?
I mean, obviously, it depends on where we are and the different demographics of height in that region. I think we've stuck with that policy for that reason that I just mentioned. It's a a multi-person, multi-generational product, so you want it to fit as many people as possible. So we've always stuck with this universal fit idea for that reason.
Okay.
And I think we're always looking at ways to try and improve upon this. We're testing, always testing new ways to try and refine the bike, and some of those will make it and some of those won't. But right now you can get on it, maybe 12 years old, 11 years old. Dave, maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong here about what ages we're running programs at, but we would always look to expand that. We would always look to make, for one thing to be as useful as possible. It won't be our approach to, in fact, the early days of Buffalo, we had, different sizes and a lot of different models of the bike. And we did something quite special, which was to go, instead of expanding upon that, was actually to start restricting it back to one very universal design. And we really don't want to depart from that, because it's what makes the bike special.
Yeah, and I assume also helps with the production of it as well. You can really ramp up and economies of scale.
Absolutely, yeah.
And you're using some pretty significant manufacturing partners with this. I think the S2 had both Trek and Giant associated with it. Are there any others that meet that list?
Yeah, I mean, the S2 is sort of the latest version of the bike, and you have that phrase, we stand on the shoulders of giants, and so many people across the industry have contributed to that. To name some would be to omit others, but
sure. Okay.
The number of players that have contributed is quite remarkable. You can walk around a trade show and, oh yeah, hey, how you doing? They helped on this, and it's a really, really nice thing.
Yeah, I mean, you've got your partners on the website, so I saw, some familiar names like Kenda for the tires, KMC for the chains, VP for the pedals. I mean, there's some very big manufacturers and players behind the creation of this thing, which is pretty awesome to see. But I mean, I guess that brings up a question, which is, I would think one of the weak points of the bike, and one of the perhaps the hardest issues of the bike, is if you've got a rack that can carry 100 kilos, you're taking your rider, you're going over rugged terrain, and it needs to be durable. I mean, pneumatic tires are always a difficulty in that space. So I mean, these bikes, they have their own specific tire by the sounds of it.
Yeah, I mean, we've done a lot of co-developing over the years, where we sort of, we lean on the expertise of others, and Kenda's a really good example of that. Our tire is tried all kinds of tires over the years, of course, but the one we've landed on, the one that's really endured, is this one we have today, which is quite heavily reinforced. It's a very thick tire, and it's all about it's all trade-offs. You have some extra weight in the tire, but if you're in the middle of nowhere, you don't want a flat, and you'll put up with that bit of weight for it.
Yeah.
It always raises the question of isn't there something better than a pneumatic tire and solid tires and all these things? And we've tried all kinds of stuff, but we always look to the customer and the user to tell us, to calibrate, all right, well, what really matters here. And I think, a lot of people like riding on pneumatic tires. They're a lot more comfortable than solid tires. And again, like with the welding, I mean, finding a roadside mechanic or someone who can help you fix the flat is, relatively common in places we operate. And so the technology of the pneumatic tire is still a good fit for most of our customers, I would say.
What's the tire size that the bike uses?
It's a 26-inch wheel. And I think the tire we have is a 1.95, I think.
Okay, all right.
So fairly sturdy kind of tire.
Fairly common size,
and 26 is a good size for a sort of utility bike. That obviously it's small, so it's kind of strong and has good sort of spoke design, and you can get spare parts for it. And I think a lot of our design decisions are constrained around, we look at, right, well, if you can't get our parts, what can you get? And we have to sort of, stick with those standards and sizes, because that's more value to the person on the bike than deviating from it.
Okay, interesting. Are there any other parts of the bike that you, I guess, as from a design point of view, that you're really proud of, that you look to and were a big lift in terms of getting it done, or anything that you just feels like perfectly designed to the application?
I mean, we've been working on the drivetrain for so long. It's
sure.
It's definitely been kind of all-consuming, and I think, I don't know if I would say we were proud. I think we're we're not done. I think
Okay.
it's a step along the road. And for example, we always name our projects, and the name of this project was First Ascent for the simple reason that we knew it was the first time up the mountain, but it wouldn't be the second. It wouldn't be the last, rather. And it was enough just to get it in production, but it really is just a step on a much longer road where we want to get this thing stable, and we want to get it on more bikes in more places, and then it can be more helpful.
Is the S2 functionality backward compatible? Like, can existing Buffalo bikes be upgraded to be a 2-speed, or are there sort of chainline issues and similar related there?
No, it can be done.
Okay.
We've developed kind of an upgrade process. Retrofitting a drivetrain is not always easy on any bike. I mean, things change, and the way we designed our original bike, it needs some encouragement to take it. But I think we'll find that people don't change bikes that often in our markets. I mean, it's more like buying a house or something. You might have it for the rest of your lives. You might pass it on. And so we have to make these options available. And so we developed a sort of process for doing that. And that's early days too. We're going to try that out. We'll refine it, and we'll expand it and learn from it. And it's part of the journey.
From the very beginning, product development and the way we've sort of approached it is the conditions and the terrain and where we operate. We often say Africa probes for weakness. And so what comes standard off the shelf, or what you think might be the spec that might work, soon breaks down and be able to do that. So the team, our product specialists, but also our supply chain team that work in Asia, just do a remarkable job of speccing and continuing looking at iteration. So I think of things like our saddle, and I think of things like our pedal. At one point, those were challenges. They are no longer challenges. Our grips, the spokes, the spoke nipples, all those things that each and every one part of this bicycle has gone through based upon, being purpose designed for these conditions.
I'm curious. I didn't have this on the list of questions, but what goes into making the perfect saddle? What did you find there? What's the saddle that 800,000 bikes have benefited from?
Well, Dave might have more history on that than I do. That's going back a bit. We've been pretty happy with that saddle for a while. I think there's obviously industry standard tests we can do, but we always find that that's not enough. And looking at the way things are used and the way things are failing, and kind of reading what's happening to the existing saddles, and a lot of trial and error, and just working with those suppliers. Hey, can we upspec this? Can we change this? What's the consequence of doing that? Getting those, shipped out to country and having those test riders ride them, put them through their paces, analyze where they're failing, and then, just like you would with anything. I mean, me and a few others at WBR, we come from the SRAM world, and we'd worked on their electronic drivetrains and things like that. And it's very much the same process. There's nothing different really. Just different group of people we're trying to help here.
And I think I always say that's the fundamental value proposition of World Bicycle Relief, is taking the skills and the processes that's used at the very top of the industry, whether you're talking about SRAM or Trek or Giant, instead of thinking about at the very top of the industry, giving voice to people at the bottom of the economic pyramid. And so this type of product testing and product development has never been done before in the bicycle industry. And that's really the unique thing of what we do. The field testers we talk about, the supply chain managers, the continuous improvement, and the laboratory testing, all those things, nobody else is doing that. And that's really different. So you talk about the saddle. I mean, sitting a saddle out in the sun and on the equator for a long, long, long period of time, you'll find out what breaks and what foam breaks down, and the nose pops off, and then let's try this again. So I think that literally was a 3-year process to try to get to something that we're very pleased with now.
Yeah, I mean, the link to SRAM there. I mean, has SRAM learned anything through having all these bikes out in the wild that might have informed the way they test products for first world country consumers? And
I don't know that we've had that much cross-pollination that way yet, but I'm willing to bet that as we keep working on our systems here, eventually there'll be some flow the other way. They're very interested, very supportive, of course. There are things that are always difficult in development, both for us and for them. So introducing real world conditions into tests to kind of capture the magic of what happens in real life is always difficult, and so that's a big challenge for everyone.
All right. Well, before we wrap up, Dave, I'm just keen to hear about the strategic plans moving forward. I mean, where does World Bicycle Relief go from here? What's next?
We could not be more excited about where we go from here. So these last 18 years, I think, have been about going from our youth into our adolescence, and now we're ready to go into our adulthood. And a lot of that had to do with product development. It had to do fundamentally, do we have the right tool to best serve people so they can overcome mobility poverty, they can bridge that gap, that they have a reliable tool to access education, healthcare, economic opportunities. And we've also done a lot of research as it relates to the impact of our mobility programs. So we talk about what does the difference it makes as far as giving students that live far away from school bicycles. It improves, especially girl students, it improves their attendance, improves their academic performance, it improves their confidence and their ability to go to the next level. It improves access to healthcare. So there's a lot of talk and development about last mile health when we think about vaccinations, when we think about child healthcare. And having a bicycle in these contexts makes a huge difference. So we have a strategy going forward that talks about growth, partnership, and influencing. And really, it's that influencing of all the lessons that we've learned over the last 20 years, coming on 20 years, and some of the ways of working, then in partnering with these larger development organizations. So World Health Organization, talking about working with UNICEF, working with some of the larger development players, including the ministries of education, the ministries of health within the countries and where we operate, to partner with them to overcome some of these challenges that they're facing with bicycles. So it's really thinking about how you scale that impact. And then the growth comes through, continue to innovate our programs, our bicycles, continue to build that ecosystem of support as it relates to mechanics and supply chain. How do we get spare parts to the right people at the right time, making sure that they're accessible? So all those things coming together, as we approach 1 million bicycles delivered, that's great. That's an amazing accomplishment. We should celebrate. It's a drop in the bucket. There are over 1 billion people that need reliable transportation. So we want to partner with others, encourage others, bring people in together to help overcome this mobility poverty.
And I guess, to wrap up, I mean, how can people that are listening, how can they help?
I think one of the best ways is to go to our website, worldbicyclerelief.org, learn more about our approach, our bicycle, some of the ways that you can contribute, that you can participate, different fundraising activities. We do an activation called Pedal to Empower, where you can ride locally and think globally as it relates to different activations there. Engage with your company and think about ways of partnership there. So we're all about, sort of bringing the broader world together.
Well, thank you. I mean, the bike is super cool. It looked great. It's one of those things that we discussed in the podcast that I think a lot of us would buy as a pub bike if we could. But it is also nice to know that the efforts are going to those that truly need the bike. But thank you for your work, and it's a great cause. So, all right.
Thank you, Dave. Really appreciate the time.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, and that's that concludes this episode of Geek Warning. Hope you all enjoyed it. Feel free to jump on to escapecollective.com, leave your feedback on the episode, and if you can, support World Bicycle Relief. Cheers.